I think it's important as the agency owner to know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and don't feel like you have to be the person to maintain all the systems and maintain the iteration of the systems. Ideally, hire the right people that can step in and own that for you so that you can do what you do best, right? Which is growing the business and innovating and looking into the future of where things are headed next.
What's going on, everybody? Joel Irway here, and welcome to another very special episode of Experts Unleashed. I'm super excited. You guys are in for a treat today. We have a very, very special guest, Josh Nelson, who is the founder and the owner of Seven Figure Agency. Now, I was first exposed to Josh probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I think one of his books was promoted and caught my attention. I downloaded it, purchased his stuff, went through it. It is phenomenal. We had a chance to catch up a couple of weeks ago, and we have a lot of things, a lot of similarities in common. And I really wanted to get him on the show to expose you guys to what he is doing over at Seven Figure Agency. So super pumped to dive into the conversation here today. But before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by getinspired.app. So have you ever thought or seen a great ad or piece of content from your favorite creator and ever thought to yourself, man, I wish I wrote that? Well, now you can. Inspired is an AI browser extension that can take winning ads and content and adapt them to your offer and messaging in just 2 clicks. Transform your favorite content for your brand right now. Get a 14-day free trial at getinspired.app. Josh, welcome, my man. Super excited to have you on.
And I'm pumped to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Give our audience a quick 30 or 60-second, brief introduction about who you are, and then we'll dive into the conversation here today.
Yeah, so I run 2 businesses. I run Plumbing HVAC SEO, which is our digital marketing agency. Does about $7 million per year, about 60 full-time employees. And I also run my passion project, Seven Figure Agency, which is our coaching and mentorship program specifically for digital marketing agencies on how to build a 7 figures and multiple 7 figures and beyond.
Already, one thing stands out from me, and this is you have to be a systems guy, right? To be able to run, a 60-plus person team, running your own agency, while also running an education mastermind business that teaches other people how to do that for themselves. You have to be very, very systems oriented. Is that true? I mean, it has to be
No doubt.
true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I'm naturally inclined towards the system stuff, but had to do 2 things. First of all, believe that systems were mission critical. And number 2, find the right people that are, very high follow through, high fact find, great with systems to help keep things organized and moving in the right direction.
How long have you been in the agency game? Not the education side, but how long have you been running was it Plumbing and HVAC agency?
Well, I mean, I've been in the agency space since 2000. Basically started my first web design and hosting company right out of high school, which was a flop and a failure. Worked at Reach Local, the big pay-per-click management company, for a few years, but actually launched Plumbing and HVAC SEO back in 2011. So quite a long time in the agency world.
So when you first got started, I guess like everyone, you're probably like figuring out how can I go get clients, right? So there's that aspect, but I want to really focus on the systems aspect of like because it's very clear you have to be very rigid around your systems, people to consistently hit that next level in your business over and over and over again. Managing 60 employees, that's got its own systems architecture. Right. And so when was the first time that you realized like, hey, I have to build systems or I have to build processes, and did something break in order for that to happen? I'm going to think early days, like when you really started to really take some big steps in those businesses.
Yeah, I think, even after our first 5, agency clients on our own, we had mapped out like, what's the deliverable? What are we going to do? How are we going to get the things done? But it was all living in our head, right? And so we started getting those question mark emails and calls from the client, like, hey, what's going on? Where's this? Where are we at on that? And, we just realized, look, this isn't going to work if we don't put this into a project management system of some sort. And it started out for us just as an Excel sheet with a bunch of columns and a bunch of rows and a bunch of due dates. And it iterated from there to actually being in a project management system like Basecamp or ClickUp like it sits today. But I really believe if you don't have the systems for delivery, if you don't have the systems for team management, if you don't even have the systems for client acquisition, you're not going to be able to consistently execute for yourself and for the clients that you serve.
When did you launch Seven Figure Agency, the education side?
Education side launched like in 2013 or 2014.
Okay.
And it was we had first crossed the 7-figure barrier. So it was about 2 years into the agency, 2.5 years.
Okay, cool. 2.5 years in, you're like, okay, cool. I think there's something here that I have of value to offer other agency owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you bridge the gap, launch the education arm, and you are the, I would say the premier face of the education space for agency owners. I know probably dozens of people who have gone through your systems, gone through your trainings, joined your coaching programs, joined whatever you have to offer, because I hear that your name, your brand come up over and over and over again. Now, when you start working with other agency owners, depending on whatever level they are at, right? When you take a look inside of their business, what's the first thing that you're looking at that really identifies, can they even hit that 7-figure mark?
Yeah. So for me, it always starts with the model. And I know that seems basic, but my first business, which failed catastrophically, I knew how to sell. I knew how to do the work. I was working the amount of hours. I just wasn't getting the results. It was predominantly, I didn't have the right model. And so there's a million ways to run a digital marketing agency. I just like to use the model that worked best for me, which is choose a niche, develop a program that you're going to deliver again and again and again, position yourself as the expert and get clients to come to you and charge a monthly retainer-based service. And so that's usually the starting point. I look at an agency as like, do you have the right model that can scale? If not, let's go ahead and make those tweaks and those adjustments. And then it's typically around the client acquisition process. Like we don't have enough deal flow to get 10, 15 strategy sessions per month to be able to get to a state of momentum.
So when you're looking at someone's model, what does it look like before you really develop the model for them? So like you just outlined your model process, but when someone is kind of trying to find their own way right now and like, there's lots of different offers out there. What are the traditional things that they start off doing? They get some success and then they realize, man, I've got a hot mess on my hands and there's nothing that's going to allow me to really take that next step forward. So what does it look like in that person's business?
I think typically what I see is a generalist agency that's serving any and everybody, right? It's like, hey, I can work with a local business. I can work with e-com. I can work with anything. And it's a very a la carte, whatever the client needs approach, which is they meet with the client. They say they want to do a website and they want content and they want posting to their social profile every day. And you're like, yeah, let's do it. And then they've got to get to work figuring out how they're going to deliver on that. And they're literally reinventing the wheel for every single client. And so what it creates is no clarity on who the client is. And so they're relying on sitting in BNI meetings, getting referrals, and there's no consistent deal flow. But then on the delivery side, there's no way to scale it because they have to, in their own mind, figure it out. And if you haven't pre-engineered what the program's going to look like, what the deliverables are, it's very hard to delegate that to a team and actually have the service done on a consistent basis. And so I see that was those would be the most common traits: general, figuring out, a la carte for every single client, and just not really getting momentum.
Are you seeing anything unique happen in the, I'll call it offer/delivery space right now that's really shifting for agency owners? With it, obviously with AI being so relevant and kind of taking over so much of our stuff, but it's got to change the game for deal flow. It's got to change the game of how agencies are positioning themselves and creating different offers. What are you seeing with your clients, with your services, how you guys need to shift and pivot?
Yeah, I'd say, kind of even before the AI shift is just recognizing as an agency owner, for a long time, it was about getting the client ranked and getting them traffic, right? It was like, if I'm getting you ranked and I'm getting you traffic, I've won. And then of course, the next iteration from that was the clients were saying, oh, but these aren't converting into leads and I'm not getting any sales out of it. So the agency owners had to like, okay, well, we're not just going to generate traffic. We're going to generate qualified leads. And that's web forms, it's inbound calls, it's all of that stuff. I think over the last couple of years, most agency owners have recognized, well, just even generating the lead isn't enough, right? We have to actually generate the leads that are qualified. We have to put the tracking in place to see which of those leads are converting into revenue. So in the case of plumbing and HVAC SEO, we were an SEO agency, and then we were actually a full service digital marketing agency, generating the leads. And now we're also doing the marketing automation on the back end of those leads to check, hey, the lead came in, did you follow up? Let's put some automation in place for speed to lead, for follow-up over time. And let's put the tracking in place so we can actually see what customer turned into an actual revenue generating opportunity. And then how are we converting those one-time customers into repeat buyers that use us again and again? So all of that to say, from the most basic, offer shift, we don't just get rankings and leads. We have to actually be growth partners with the clients that we serve. And AI is totally changing the game, right? Like we have to make sure that we're using AI to help bridge the gap between which of our leads actually turn into sales, whether that's through transcribing their inbound leads and, kind of automatically rating the outcomes so that we can drill down on the strategies that work best. But, who knows what else is on the horizon. But I see that's the biggest stuff that I'm seeing right now.
It's fascinating because that's where I see AI as being a disruptor. Is it going to disrupt some people who really don't know how to utilize it? Possibly. Is it going to knock some people out of jobs? Possibly. But what I see is pretty much what you just echoed, is it's going to force the service providers or the agencies to now start offering more comprehensive, like more all-encompassing services of now it's not just traffic, it's not just leads, it's probably going to be full-blown client acquisition at some point, if not already there. So where the company in the past would probably hire an expert for SEO or for traffic, then they'd have to handle the leads. Like all of these things were split up. Well, now I think it's now all being migrated into one full service agency house that can do everything except actually, fulfilling on the HVAC services for their clients. But in terms of client acquisition, it's probably going to go to full-blown growth partners. And so I love that. Now let's imagine like we're somebody who's like getting into the game. It's got to be pretty overwhelming for them to figure out what to offer or how to even attack a market. They might have heard, I got to niche down or I got to systemize or whatnot, but like, how does one even start to look at opportunities within an agency? Because I think agencies appeal to a lot of people. I was appealed to it. That's why I started my agency. Where does one start in really trying to get traction with what to offer now, especially with so much changing with AI?
I think if you're going back to just starting in the agency space, usually going to have either some pre-inclination of what you like to do and what you're great at, or you're going to have some past experience, right? Like maybe you built websites or you did Facebook ads. I think you lead with like those areas that you already have expertise and you find strategic partners. I don't think you can run the whole agency on white label, but in the early days, you find white label providers and strategic partners that can fill in the gaps. But if you want to be full service, that's going to improve retention. It's going to improve average ticket. It's going to improve lifetime customer value. It's going to improve actually your stickiness with the clients and the results that you get. You probably can't do it all yourself right out of the gates. And I also think early days, you probably can't just choose the niche and know that's the right niche and have it go to the nth degree. I would say if you're starting out, you look at your past experience, maybe like businesses you've worked in the past, family businesses that you've been associated with, and start having conversations there. Usually you're going to want to get 5 or 10 clients in general, right? You don't have to be like, oh, I'm just selling plumbing companies right out of the gates, but always be thinking like, okay, I want to get this to 5+ clients in this space so that I can double down, so that I can build a process around this and I can scale it to hundreds of clients within this one vertical.
Okay, cool. So when they start getting that traction, let's say they've got their first 5 clients or maybe 10 clients, they're doing 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month. And let's say that they are now following most of your methodology of like, I've picked a niche, I've got some decent pipeline coming through, I've got one core offer that now becomes predictable, repeatable. Like, what's the next bottleneck that they struggle with, like at that stage to kind of keep ramping up, keep leveling up?
Yeah, I think at that stage, it becomes how much time are you personally investing in delivery, in team management, in account management? And that's really where you have to build out the organization to scale, right? And I really think first position you got to remove yourself is the doing of the work. So operations, whatever your program is, if you're still writing the content, if you're still setting up the websites, if you're still connecting the AI, that's the first thing you need to place somebody and say, I need you to own this so that I can be the owner of the business. Second is usually account management, right? Once you've got 10, 15 clients, those clients need to be talking with somebody on a continuous basis, ask questions, get feedback, move those relationships forward. You want to get an account management person and or build an account management team so that you're not stuck as the bottleneck there. And then third is probably some type of administrative support. If you're still doing the low value tasks, booking your travel, paying the bills, dealing with all of the administrative work within the business, you'll never be free to think bigger, to put bigger marketing initiatives in place. And usually that's if you're at $30,000 or $40,000 a month of recurring and you can't create the mental space to grow, it's because you need to start to put the infrastructure in place to free yourself up.
When you launched Plumbing and HVAC SEO, is that the name of the agency? Is that correct?
Plumbing and HVAC SEO, yep.
Why that niche? I only asked that because I was in the HVAC niche for about 5 years. I was in sales and marketing for commercial HVAC installers. Why did you choose plumbing and HVAC?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I worked at Reach Local. So I saw, the sales reps there selling every vertical you can imagine. And I just saw a bunch of reps get really great success in home services. And I kind of resonated with the home service space. And so when we actually started the agency, it wasn't going to be plumbing. It was going to be, I had restaurants, attorneys, eye doctors. Like I picked a bunch of domains and bought a bunch of lists. And funny enough, our first client happened to be a plumbing client. And I met with a guy in South Florida. His name was Wes from Town Plumbing. He agreed to sign up for our program. He gave us a check, which I don't want you to take checks, but he gave us a check. And we went back and we slapped high fives, me and my business partner, and we deposited it. And we had a little conversation about, hey, this plumbing thing is cool, but we're going to focus on restaurants. Don't worry. We're going to build that side of the business. And we just never got traction in restaurants, but Town Plumbing, we got him ranked #1 for Fort Lauderdale Plumber, Fort Lauderdale Plumbing. He started to see his phone ring and he referred us to somebody else. And all of a sudden we had 2 clients within the plumbing space. And it just became the path of least resistance. It turns out, by the way, plumbing HVAC is an amazing industry. The transaction values are great. They're all pre-positioned to invest in marketing. They were heavy in yellow pages decades ago. They're heavy in digital marketing today. And so there was money to be optimized. And, the whole side of the equation when plumbing and HVAC is there's a shortage of tradespeople, but a massive increase in demand. And so it's just a growth industry. I love it. I continue to be in it. And I plan to be in it for decades to come. But I kind of stumbled backwards into it and just chose it as the path of least resistance. And have now grown to hundreds and hundreds of clients within that space.
Well, I think you had the opportunity glasses on, right? And, sometimes that's where I think a lot of people miss it. Is like they fall in love with whatever direction they wanted to go or whatever they are really passionate about. For you, it was restaurants, but it's like, hey, someone else keeps giving me checks. Like, where should I put my focus? Or maybe I should look a little bit deeper into that.
Exactly.
It's funny because like the home services niche is man, I've talked to so many people who are launching offers, not just agency owners, but we've had people in the home services niche launch their own like education arm. Like the perfect example was one client, he built a 7-figure cabinet refinishing company in Orlando, Florida. And he's like, yeah, I want to teach people how to do this because it's incredibly lucrative. The demand is outrageous and it's super simple to get set up. And we've had that happen time and time and time again, where like home services niche is just, there's so many niches and there's so much money to be had there that I think from an agency owner, focusing somewhere in home services is probably a good way to get started or a good way to look first and foremost, because there's just so much opportunity there. And I think I don't want to say it's overlooked, but it's pretty incredible how much money there is in home services all around the board. So, okay, awesome. Now that was, well, I'm just trying to remember, 2013-ish when you launched that?
2011. Yep.
2011 when you started that. Okay. And how quickly did that really ramp up? Take us through that journey phase of like, as you ramped up, as you went through the growing pains, as you had to figure out, each major hurdle to overcome to get to the next stage, the next stage, the next stage. Like, walk us through that path.
Yeah. So, obviously initially in the industry, probably the first year was landing on the niche, deciding to double down on the plumbing and HVAC space. I believe we did about $500,000 on our first year. The second year was going deep into the space. So it was like, okay, we know plumbing is the thing, joining the association, starting to go out to the events and have a booth and look for opportunities to present and position ourselves as the authority. By the time we got to the second year, we were at about the 7-figure level. And after that, it was about keeping momentum on the business development side of the equation. And, shifting from just cold outreach initially to having clients start to come to us to eventually recognize that we need some appointment setting processes in place. We need to put in a funnel in place where people can schedule in and come in pre-positioned to buy. And we need to start to advertise and actually invest more in marketing as we grew. But a lot of it was infrastructure building, right? It was putting that operations person in place. It was building that account management team and then getting all of those functional experts in place, because we didn't outsource. Like, we literally, built an internal team in Miami, Florida. We had an office where people went every day, which I know is very foreign in the digital marketing world. We had an office with dozens of people coming in and working every single day. But over the years, we made the Inc. 5000 list. I think by the time we got to the fourth year, we made it 4 years consecutive on that list. Today, we're doing about $7 million in annualized revenue with a completely virtual team, because after COVID, we realized, hey, this would be kind of cool not to have the office and be able to work from home and be able to not just, get South Florida talent, but hire the best talent from wherever they happen to live. And that's the world we live in today.
You made the transition from being totally local to now being virtual. I've tried to market and hire locally, and I live in a middle of nowhere town, right? So like, we are very slow to adapt anything digitally, anything. Like, Uber came to Buffalo and Niagara Falls like 4 years ago, right? So to give you an idea of like how slow we are to evolution. Did you ever find difficulty in hiring talent? You're in South Florida, so I'm assuming you had probably a plethora of opportunities. I'm just going to make an assumption you probably didn't have that much of a challenge finding like talented individuals, or can you speak to that a little bit?
We have access to a lot of people, right? And lots of like universities here in Miami, which is where we're based. With the amount we could pay for account management, for web development, for SEO was well below the standard of a seasoned professional. And so we had to get good at hiring kids, high school, right out of college, and training them up to do the work and to have those skills. And then we found that once they were with us for about a year or 2 years, their skill level was to a place where they would go and get a lot more money somewhere else. And so we had a little bit of a hire cheap, get them trained up, and then have them move on. And so, going international gave us the ability to pay at the top of the pay grade, get people that already had some experience, and have a much more consistent workforce, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I love talking about that stuff, and only because I've experienced it too, and I know other people have experienced this. Like, they don't have the funds right away to pay for top talent. They really have to invest in their systems and their training to be able to bring in an entry-level type employee or contractor or worker and make it foolproof, so that entry-level person can really operate at a B+ or an A-level player, just for the systems and in the operations of how can I make this so foolproof that really hard to screw up. So anyway, I know we took a little side tangent there, but I think it's very relevant for someone who wants to grow a team, who wants to understand like, hey, there are obstacles that you're going to face when it comes to attracting, recruiting, and retaining talent. I want to bring it back to something you talked about when you mentioned your journey, like year one, going from zero to like $500,000 that first year. You said year two was really when you started to position yourself as an authority. You'd go to conferences, you'd join the associations, you look for speaking opportunities. You mentioned one thing, and it was about getting leads to come to you now. Now, I know that's something that you are really passionate about and you advocate for. Talk about that, because there's probably a lot of people who may not have the desire to go sponsor booths at conferences and do the, I'll call it dog and pony show, because that's what it was for me when I was in HVAC. It was like, okay, I was a sales rep, like I'm doing dog and pony show all the time. Like that was my whole job, my whole role. But talk about other ways that you help agency owners get the leads to come to you.
Yeah, so I think most agency owners live by two plays. Number one is referrals, right? They just want to, do a good enough work that people magically fall into their lap. And unfortunately, that isn't super scalable, right? You can't, amp that up or amp that down. You're just going to get what you get. The other one is just cold outreach, right? And for whatever reason, they think that the best play is to just spam people or DM people and hopefully get some appointments and sales from that. And I think there's a place for it. But if all of your deal flow is coming from cold outreach, they're going to meet with you in a very guarded position. Like, hey, I'll give you 5 minutes of your time. You better be impressive, right? And then you got to make a massive offer and you've got to have a guarantee, and you're really in a bad position from the start, versus if you can show value in advance to the prospects you want to work with, where they see, all right, this is an agency owner that understands my industry, that has proven results, that seems to know exactly what they're doing, what they're talking about, and they seek you out or they schedule in on their own to meet with you. It's a completely different position. And so there's three things I would really recommend if you want to get clients to come to you pre-positioned to buy. Number one is start putting out value-added content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Joel, you're the webinar guy and you're the expert at this, doing the paid workshops. But I think if you're not doing at least one webinar, whether it's free or paid every single month, you're missing the opportunity to nurture your database, to get in front of the industry, to put just value out into the industry. And when you do that, every time you create one of those workshops, you're creating content that you can put on YouTube, you can make a podcast, you can get out in front of your audience. So that's number one, is a webinar every single month. Number two, super easy, is a podcast, just like Joel's doing right here in whatever niche you're in. So I work with plumbing and HVAC companies. Every month, I would bring on a successful plumbing or HVAC company, ask them to tell us about themselves, ask them to tell us about their marketing, ask them to tell us about how they're recruiting great talent. And there's just not that much relevant interview style content in any of the verticals that you might consider. And so
100%.
when you do that, you align with really smart people that you probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And you magnetically attract people. It's like, wow, look, they're sharing all this information, all this valuable insights. And you just do that once a month, you're going to start to get clients coming to you pre-positioned to buy. And then the third to get clients coming to you is case studies, right? Is actually, you need to prove your results. And so with every client, you should be thinking, how do I do such a great job that I can tangibly show the result that I got for this client? And they'd be willing to come on and do an interview like this and talk about their experience and talk about why they chose you. If you can do those three things month in and month out, you will absolutely position yourself as an expert. And you'll be surprised to see people showing up at your door, not saying, hey, I'll give you 5 minutes, but I've been following you. I've been watching your case studies. I've been looking at your webinars. I read your book, and you just tell me how much it's going to cost, right? And that's where I'd like to see more agencies get to.
Yeah, I agree 100% because I was never part of the cold outreach game. And listen, I've responded to cold emails. Like it definitely has its place. And usually people who say that they're on a budget or they don't want to invest in ads, or there's a number of reasons why people ultimately decide to go to the cold outreach game. But if they take a step back and just really analyze, I would say, look at yourself and just say, how long do I really want to be in this industry? If this is just like a get rich quick, whatever, you just want to make a buck and you really don't have any purpose of building a team, building the systems, building the processes, fine. Go spam, go cold outreach, whatever you want. But if you really are passionate about this and you want to build something like what you're talking about, a 7-figure agency, I agree with you 100%. You do need to get clients to come to you. And I'll echo, it's really not that hard. Now, is it easy? It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. And the only difficult thing about it is just longevity. Like, it's not even necessarily a long play game. Like, once you get one case study, my first client that I had, I turned that into a case study PDF and I ran ads to it. And that's what scaled my agency in the early days. It's just showing other people who are in your target niche how you got a specific result using some sort of unique process that you developed for them. That's it.
Yep.
That's how you generate demand. So I echo that 100,000% because so many people won't do that. So many people won't go and start a podcast and go interview their potential prospects, their potential clients. Actually, I had a recent conversation with a guy who that's his only thing that he does is he runs podcasts to his target audience to generate leads to potentially get clients. And it's like, man, those three things, if you just pick one of them and do it, you will get clients coming to you. And there's so much better positioning when you have those conversations. Like, hey, let's have a conversation. Like, I'm ready to hire you. Okay, cool. Like, it's no longer a sales conversation. It's like you're an order taker.
Exactly.
When you present that to people, you say, hey, listen, these are the 3 ways to get inbound. These are the 3 main ways that I use to get inbound. What's the typical pushback that you get from people when you present those 3 options?
I think it sounds like work, right? Like, I don't know what I would talk about. I don't know what I would put on my slides. No one would want to actually be on an interview with me. Why would they want to do that? I don't have any case that, like, those are the pushback elements. And what I would say is you're a student of the game, right? So if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you're a student of the game. You read the blogs, you go to those trade shows and conferences on digital marketing. All you have to do is take the knowledge that you're hearing and apply it to your niche, right? Literally just take something that you heard that was really interesting, doesn't need to be an hour, and turn that into a live webinar or workshop, whatever you want to call it, and unpack that concept. And once you've done 1 or 2, you're going to start to build your confidence. You're going to start to expand your comfort zone, right? And now you'll have the skill that you can use again and again and again and again to attract clients on demand.
It just takes practice. It takes just doing the first one and getting some repetition. And it's really not difficult. It's just like when you learned how to run an agency, when you learned how to do whatever service you're providing, you weren't great at it in the beginning. But I think this speaks to what you talked about, is really taking the steps up to becoming the CEO. It's like, okay, you were great at fulfilling the service, but eventually, once you've got 10 clients, like if you want to get 20, you're stretched too thin. There's no way you can double your client base if you're the one who's in there doing it. That brings me to my next question. Hiring. Where do people struggle when it comes to hiring? Do they hire the wrong people? Do they not have the right SOPs in place to make that hire successful? When you see someone really go from, say, let's start even lower, maybe like $200,000 a year to $1 million a year, what holds them back from that gap in terms of hiring?
Yeah. The big mistakes there, the first big one is just thinking I need this role and hiring for it without knowing in advance what are the expectations for this role, what are their day-to-day duties, what would the KPIs be for this position, and then they hire someone and then they place them into the role and they're like, hey, they don't know what to do and I've got to babysit them and, I'm just going to do the work myself. And so you got to be intentional enough on the front end to say, okay, like what are those things? Because they're not magically just going to know what to do unless maybe you're paying someone very, very top wage and it's a predefined situation you're looking to put in place. The other big mistake I made often in our hiring process was hiring people like me without doing any personality profile testing or anything. I would put out the job post. I'd get a bunch of applicants. I'd meet with someone and they'd come on and they'd be passionate and they'd be well-spoken and they just impress me. And I'd be like, okay, that's the person. And I'd put them in the role. And then 2 months in, they're just not following through. They're not getting the work done. And it's because somebody like you, if you're the entrepreneur, is probably high quick start, likes to be out in front, but doesn't like to do the work, doesn't like to follow through on things. And when I realized I don't need to hire someone like me, I need to hire someone probably very different than me, somebody that's going to want to do this job day in and day out. It's going to want to follow through on it. And so my shortcut for this is the Kolbe assessment, which I'm a big fan of. I give it to anybody I hire for in the agency. And like literally looking for someone that's going to be high fact find, high follow through. And when I started hiring that way and I started teaching agencies to look at that profile, you can start to get better candidates that actually stay in the role. They might not be super articulate, but they're going to do the job and they're going to follow through and they're going to check the boxes, which is really what you want.
Yeah, man, I did that far too late in my career because I didn't do what you did. Like I didn't look for myself, but I refused to look at personality profiles and I would like just hire whoever sold themselves the best to me. It's like, oh, this person says they can do the job. Awesome. Let's hire them. And then it's like, wouldn't even be 2 months. It'd be like 2 weeks. Just knew it wasn't going to work out. But I did start doing personality assessments. We went through a very specific hiring process. Do you have any books that you recommend in terms of hiring processes? Or like, is it just something you've tried and learned and developed over the years? Because if you go down that rabbit hole, I know there's millions of resources of best practices for hiring.
I'm a big fan of The Who, which is a great book, kind of 100%. Foundational, how to hire, how to train, how to recruit. I think there's a lot of great resources on this. Qasim Aslam has some great training that he's come out with recently on how to find amazing virtual talent, which I highly recommend everybody check out.
Yeah, we use The Who. I don't know if it's The Who or Who, but we use that when we were scaling one arm of our agency. We use that to find an operations manager and also like a team lead. And the night and day quality of just the applicants we were getting just by following their hiring process, like how they spoke, how they put out the job application, it's like that made all the difference in the world. Love it. Sweet. So Josh, what else am I missing? What are the other major things that, when you're in a conversation with someone and maybe they're considering working with you or joining a 7-figure agency, what are the major questions that what are the major obstacles that they're having right now in their business? Obviously, productizing is probably one of them, making sure you're picking one specific fulfillment objective that you can systemize over and over and over again. But like, what are some of the other ones?
I think the other big one is retention, right? I think as you start to get to scale in the agency, retention becomes an issue, right? It's like it feels like you're taking one step forward, one step back. Sometimes it can erode your confidence as the agency owner. And so just getting intentional with what are the strategies you can put in place to create long-term relationships that go for years instead of the average of 3 to 6 months where you're on this treadmill, land a client, get them ramped up, lose the client, go back and replace that revenue. And that's, if you're not focused on that, is going to be a continuing issue in the business.
Do you guys focus on month-to-month contracts? Do you prefer 3-month, 6-month, longer term contracts to help out with retention? What are some insights there?
My preference would be, once you're established as an expert and you've already got proven results and clients start to come to you to do a 1-year commitment, right? Especially if you got a full service program or you're doing website SEO, pay-per-click, tracking, marketing automation, the whole 9 yards, you're going to put a lot of time and energy in there. Your cost to acquire that client is probably pretty high. You can set the expectation. Look, we're going to do a lot of work. It's not going to be worth it to you or us if we can't commit to do this for at least a year. And so I believe a year would be the minimum, with month to month thereafter. Again, that's assuming you've already proven yourself. Don't try and sell that if you're like getting your first handful of clients within the space. And then it really just comes down to your onboarding process, making sure you come out of the gate super strong, making sure that you've set proper expectations. You do the little things they're not expecting. And then the monthly process to check in with the clients. Typically when agencies are churning, it's either an issue with the deliverable, which is obviously results is going to be the number one driver of retention. But the other main reason clients leave is because of perceived indifference. And so just making sure that you've got an intentional process where you're checking in with the clients every single month, you're showing the value, you're not flooding them with too much information, but you're strategically showing them like, how much do they spend? How many leads do they get? What's the return on investment? You can answer that question in 30 seconds or less in the reporting and then have an intelligent conversation about where things are headed next. Your retention is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest mistakes I made early on, was month-to-month contracts. It's like, not only cost to acquire them is always going to be high. And it's not always going to be high, but like, you as a business owner, you need to justify the return on that cost per acquisition. And if you're only selling month to month, not only you're acquiring new customers, you still have a cost to acquire that same customer every single month. So that cost to reacquire that customer and reprove your value every single month to make sure their credit card goes through or make sure they pay their invoice or whatever it is, that becomes exhausting, because now you're on this hamster wheel. Like, you're just building all these different hamster wheels, client by client by client, and that becomes really, really exhausting. And that was something no one ever really shared with me. Like, oh yeah, you just sell whatever, just sell your agency services. Like, man, get them on a year-long commitment, 2-year-long commitment, 3 whatever it is, makes your life so much easier. You've got the runway to, yeah, you're going to fulfill on it, but it's like, you now don't need to put your account manager on making sure you resell them every single.
Right. It makes a huge difference, not just from that, but also from the mental buy-in. Because if you're in an agency model selling a 30-day trial or a month to month, hey, I'm going to prove the value in the next 30 days. Otherwise, you can cancel at any time. The grace that you have is very, very short. Even if they don't stay for a year, if you sold them into a year on the beginning, they're thinking on a 1-year, 2-year horizon. And that in and of itself changes the game.
It does. It does, because any agency, they should be able to get a multiple of their return on investment, especially if you're in the client acquisition game. And you put all the pressure on yourself to make that happen in month 1. And while you should do everything in your power, and if you aren't getting some sort of ROI in month 1, then I would suggest you make sure you up your service game and up your expertise.
Yeah.
But you can usually get like a massive win here and there by 1 or 2 levers that you pull, and being able to get that ROI on a year-long commitment from one of those 2 levers is substantially weighed in your favor if you can pull it off and then position it. So yeah, I mean, year-long commitments, I think, are so key. And also, it's in the benefit of the client too. They don't want to be searching for a new agency in the next 30 days or whatever. No one likes going through the process. You don't like hunting for clients. They don't like, hunting for service providers. They want to just rely on someone who's going to be there for a year or whatever and get it off their plate, right? Get it off their mental bandwidth of just worrying about that every single month. So I think that's a huge thing that I wish more people would take advantage of in just positioning their services. So that's amazing. Josh, this was fantastic, man. I love these conversations, because even though you said at the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm not really a systems brain. It's like, no, you are. And I think you know it too. But like, that's my final question before we wrap up. If you are a quick start, like I'm assuming you are a quick start, right? You mentioned that early in the beginning. Okay. How did you start building systems, or what switched in your brain? Did you hire someone to be that systems builder so you could focus on the front? Because like, I think that's a really important question that a lot of quick starts really need to know. Josh, you've got systems in place. Was it you? Did you force yourself to commit to it and say, nope, in order for me to progress, like I'm going to need to at least learn how to build systems? Or did you ultimately hire that person who was the systems brain and you relied on them to start to organize all that stuff?
I'm high quick start when I'm also high facts find. And so I'm able to build the system, at least the original iteration. I'm just not great at following through with it after the fact. And so, I built version 1 of like, here's what this process should look like. Here's what needs to be done. Here's where it needs to be done by. But we kept stubbing our toe, me and my business partner, Dean, and my wife, Yesenia, where like month 3, we wanted to move from Basecamp to some new thing, Trello or the next process system. Or we'd be 3 months in and all of those deadlines and all of those checklists and all the things that were supposed to get done had like overdue, right? Like just flooded with overdue tasks. And we had to find a high follow through operations person that could be like, hey, now I own this system. I'm going to make sure that the boxes are being checked, that the deadlines are being met, that the overdue tasks are being cleared out, because there was no way me or Dean were ever going to consistently do that. And so I think it's important as the agency owner to know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and don't feel like you have to be the person to maintain all the systems and maintain the iteration of the systems. Ideally, hire the right people that can step in and own that for you so that you can do what you do best, right? Which is growing the business and innovating and looking into the future of where things are headed next.
Yeah. So there's tremendous value in one of the things that you just talked about right there is creating version 1 of anything, right? Like that is our goal. That is our role, really, I believe, as entrepreneurs, as founders, is like we can create so much stuff and we will find problems and we'll run into problems that we need solutions for. And, if you create version 1 of what needs to be done or something that like your methodology or your process, and then hire someone to kind of see that to fruition or improve upon it, like, hey, this is the first version. I need you to either implement it or make it better or both. You will be able to find somebody and it will save you so much money if you find somebody to go fulfill and improve on version 1 versus if you go out and you have no idea what version 1 even looks like. You can go find an expert, but it's probably going to cost you like 5 to 10 times more in investments if they have to design version 1 and then help implement it. Now, there's value for both, but I think it's really important for people to understand that creating that version 1 helps everything downstream versus I've got a problem. Somebody needs to help me come up with a solution, and finding that expert will cost a lot more money, whether it's going to be a consultant or just trial and error. You hire a bunch of people who try and fulfill on what you're trying to get done, but you have no clear vision or understanding of what really needs to get done. That's going to cost a whole lot more money. So anyway, Josh, this has been fantastic. I appreciate it so much. My audience, I know, is going to love this. There's so much value that we took away from this conversation of how to truly build, I'd say 7-figure agency, but this is really 7-figure anything with just going through the process of positioning yourself. So you've got inbound leads coming in and understanding that there are steps to every single level within the business. So let's drop some links. Where can we find you? Where can my audience connect with you?
Best place to learn more, we go to 7figureagency.com. You can grab a free copy of my book, The 7-Figure Agency Roadmap. Or if you happen to be on Instagram, at Josh Nelson Coach.
Awesome. We'll make sure that we send everyone there. We'll put those links in the show notes. Josh, I appreciate it, my man. Thanks for taking the time. And everyone else, make sure you go reach out to Josh. Let him know you've heard him on Experts Unleashed. And we'll talk to you on the next episode. Take care.